Hi, everyone. Welcome to Think Outside the Board. I'm your host, Brian Toohey, and this is the late February monthly update. Now, I put out these monthly updates twice a month, and in general, they are most importantly to highlight currently running Kickstarters so that you can see if these are games that might be right for you. I've got 10 Kickstarters to highlight today. This video will cover the period of crowdfunding games that are completing their funding from February 20th through March 7th. Anyway, these videos are generally broken into 4 parts. So the first segment are Kickstarters that are currently running. The second segment are games that I've acquired since the last video. The third segment is games that I have backed since the last video. So a lot of times, if I'm talking about a bunch of Kickstarters in the first section, and you come back for the next video, usually if you want to play a mystery game with yourself, you'll be able to find out which of those games from the previous video I actually ended up backing. And this video, we're going to have 3 of those in the I backed it section. And then lastly, there'll be a segment on games that I've played since the last video. And moving forward, I'm going to try to concentrate even more on the currently running Kickstarters, the first segment, and the games that I've played, the fourth segment. And the reason for that is that if I've backed a game, I've already talked about it in the previous video when I've told you that the campaign is running. And if I've acquired a game, well, there's not really that much for me to talk about it necessarily, although it will give you a window into what's coming for future videos. I'm running a whole bunch of first impressions videos right now. I've got a bunch more to produce, and I'm actually going to include a 5th segment at the end of this video talking about the first impressions videos that you can expect on this channel in the next month or so. So if you would like to know what's coming, stay tuned for that, and that'll be after the rest of the video. There is one game that I missed again, and I didn't want to try to put this out early to catch it, but it was the Metro Big Box. And this completed funding on February 16th, so a couple days ago. Just couldn't quite fit it in. The timing was off, but hopefully what I'm doing now moving forward will minimize that in the future. There are late pledges available, so if you are interested in the Metro Big Box, you can late pledge it. And also, I always list the links to the Kickstarter campaigns down below in the comments for all these Kickstarters that I'm talking about. So if you want to late pledge Metro, you can go down to the comments and you'll be able to click on a link that will send you to the campaign. If any of these other Kickstarters tickle your whimsy, as they say, then you can go down below, click on the link, and it'll pop you over to the Kickstarter. So Metro is a tile-laying game designed by Dirk Henn, who did Shogun and Wallenstein and Alhambra. So some fairly well-known, big kind of classic games over the last 20 years. And Metro is maybe his next well-known game in that group. And Metro is a light game. It's a tile placement game. And essentially you're trying to sort of create with these weird twisty tiles, you're trying to create routes for subways. And you're building this out and you want to make your route the longest. So that is essentially what the game is. It's a light game, so it's fairly simple. There are a few different tiers if you're thinking about trying to late pledge this, and I'm not sure what exactly will be available through late pledges, but I assume it'll be the same thing that was available for the regular pledging. It'll just be perhaps a little bit more expensive. And as I continue talking about these games, everything that I'm talking about, all these price points that I'm going to mention are in terms of US dollars and shipping to the continental United States. And it's an all-inclusive title that I'm giving you. So when I say a number like $44, that will be the amount that it costs to pledge the game and have it shipped to the continental United States. So it's an all-included number, but it's only specific to the continental United States. If you're outside of the continental US, or if you're outside of the US period, the numbers will be different. But I'm just using this as kind of a touchstone number. Anyway, for Metro, there were 3 options in this campaign. There was a 44 option. Again, that $44 number included the shipping. And that was just for the base game. The just flat, retail version, essentially. The whole point of this campaign, though, was that they were offering a big box. So if you got the big box, which had everything included, all of the different expansions and that kind of stuff, that is $99. And then finally, for $300, you could get the Metro Big Box as well as the Alhambra Big Box. And that's something that Queen Games, who is the publisher, they've run Kickstarters a couple times in the last few years for the Alhambra Big Box. So if you wanted to go all in, get the Alhambra Big Box, the Metro Big Box, $300. That includes shipping, continental United States. Anyway, that already funded, as I said. It completed funding on February 16th. But if it's something that appeals to you, you should be able to go and late pledge it. Following that, we have Posthuman Saga and the Journey Home expansion. Now, the designer for this one is Gordon Kaleha, and the publisher is Mighty Boards, which is essentially Gordon's company. It publishes all of his games, and that includes Posthuman, Vengeance, and most recently Excavation Earth, which he co-designed with David Turksey. And I actually have a first impressions video for Excavation Earth that I am in the process of editing right now, so that should be up anytime. Anyway, I really like Excavation Earth. His Mighty Boards also produces Petrichor, which Gordon is not involved in as a designer, but Petrichor is pretty cool. I've been all in on all of their stuff. It's this really neat kind of abstract game about water falling off of clouds and how it fertilizes certain plants, and it's sort of like an area majority scoring. Fascinating game, in my opinion, and pretty. But that is not Posthuman Saga, which is what we're actually here to talk about. So Posthuman Saga actually reminds me of another game which I got recently, and I'm also working on a first impressions video for, called Waste Knights 2nd Edition. And I really like Waste Knights. It's pretty cool. Waste Knights is a sort of post-apocalyptic, narrative storytelling sandboxy game. In that game, you're going through a journal like you would in Above and Below or Near and Far and Sleeping Gods, and you're kind of reading passages and making choices and stuff like that. So Posthuman Saga looks a lot like Waste Knights 2nd Edition. And that's a good thing because I'm really enjoying Waste Knights 2nd Edition. I think they seem to share sort of this similar feel, similar theme, this post-apocalyptic setting, almost kind of Borderlands-like art, and most importantly, a very kind of sly, almost sick sense of humor. Now, the difference here is that Posthuman Saga is not narrative and storytelling. It's not cooperative game. Posthuman Saga is a competitive game, and it's very sandboxy. So it does put sort of character development and story front and center. So as you're doing things in the game, you will be kind of pursuing a narrative storyline for your character and kind of hitting story beats and do things that make sense in a story setting, right? But it's not a story game. You still are kind of pursuing goals, and it's got a grab bag of kind of Euro-y mechanics. So it is all about the competitive gameplay, and it is varied, but it is kind of this sandbox style. This one had several price points, because if you just wanted to get the new Journey Home expansion, which basically just gives you a lot more stuff in terms of the sandbox nature of it, more components, more ways of scoring, more ways to do things, and more kind of storyline beats. But again, those storyline beats are kind of within the realm of mechanical gameplay and doing things within a competitive game. So if you just wanted to get that new expansion, $41. If you wanted the base game, which has already existed, Posthuman Saga, $75. If you went in at that $75 pledge for the base game, there were some kind of extras that you can get as well. For $102, you could get the base game and the Journey Home expansion, but you wouldn't quite have all of the extras. And then for $149, you could basically get everything. So if this is something that you think you wanted to get and you don't have any of it, and you wanted everything, then it's the $149 pledge that you want. And again, that includes shipping for the continental United States. I'm just trying to give you kind of the highest number so that I don't say a lower number and then you go and you see the shipping and it rises above your expectations. So that $149 is all inclusive. It includes the shipping to the continental United States. Posthuman Saga is going to complete its funding on February 23rd. So you have until that date to go and pledge it if you want to. Right now it is funding at 3 times the original asking price, the original amount that they wanted to be able to fund, and that is hovering around $70,000. So it's doing well. It's going to fund. It's got 3 times what they wanted. So it's in the bag, as they say, and it's medium heavy complexity. Following Posthuman Saga, we come to Human Punishment: The Beginning. This is from Godot Games. They've already done Human Punishment and Human Punishment 2.0, so they're sort of starting to refine the formula here. This is a social deduction game, but the new version, at least, The Beginning, they throw a bunch of mechanics in there, kind of a grab bag of mechanics. So it's not just your simple run-of-the-mill social deduction game where you're like Coup or the Resistance or something where you're sending out players on missions and then people are voting and that's the entire game. No, there are much more mechanics involved in this. And in that sense, it kind of reminds me of Into Deep, which had a Kickstarter last year from Burnt Island Games. And I think this might be the direction that social deduction games are heading. Social deduction games, I think, are beginning to go beyond just this reactive gameplay. So this is semi-cooperative. There's pick up and deliver involved in this game. You've got deduction, of course. And then you've got 4 different kind of factions. So you've got human, you've got fallen, legion, and machine. And so players are going to be one of these factions when they're playing this game. And each one of these factions has a different sort of win condition that they need to manipulate within the game. Not only that, there are also individual player objective cards, and that'll create more variability. So you'll have your faction objective, and you'll also have an individual objective. Now, if you wanted to get just the kind of base version of this one, the stripped down version, that would run you $79. If you wanted to get the deluxe version, which has some improved components and things, $124. Human Punishment: The Beginning, medium heavy, and it concludes its campaign on February 24th. And this thing is selling like hotcakes right now. So they are currently at 11 times their asked funding, and that means that they've got about 350 grand right now in this campaign as I'm recording this. So they're doing well. This is a healthy campaign. Following that, we've got Core Worlds, Empires, and Nemesis. And this is a little bit of an interesting Kickstarter here because Core Worlds is a deck builder that came out in 2011. I haven't played it. It's supposed to be pretty good though, but it was overshadowed by a lot of other deck building games at the time, I think. I mean, Dominion was already out, and then kind of Ascension was ramping up. You had Thunderstone doing pretty well. Aeon's End came out. And a lot of those, and Hero Realms and Star Realms, and I think those games kind of stole Core Worlds' thunder. It didn't really become as popular as those other games. But now it's the 10-year anniversary. So we've got 2 different games here as a part of this Kickstarter. You've got Empires, which is a standalone sequel, basically. It's a standalone game. It's a sequel sort of thematically, but Core Worlds was a deck building game. And Empires is a worker placement game. So it's a completely different game. Same world, same theming, same designers, but it's a worker placement game. And then Nemesis is a solo mode for the original Core Worlds. I do not believe that Nemesis can be played without the original Core Worlds. However, you can get the original Core Worlds here as an add-on. Now, let's talk about pricing for this one because there are several different prices. So you can get just Nemesis, which is the solo mode for Core Worlds, for $30. If you want the worker placement game, Empires, that's $90. And then if you want both of them, it's $100. And again, we're talking continental United States, and my numbers there include shipping. However, they do not include the original Core Worlds game or the other expansions that have come out for that. I believe you can get those in this Kickstarter, but they are add-ons, so they're not offered as a part of the pledge. And I think you will need at least Core Worlds, the base game, if you also want to be playing Nemesis, the solo mode. So it works with that. I know that there are different sort of modes in Nemesis, so that if you want to throw in various expansions for Core Worlds, it will work with all of those various expansions. And it should be good. I mean, it should give you plenty of variability in gameplay. Core Worlds is being published right now through Chaotic Games, which is essentially Andrew Park's game company. And he's the designer for this. He has been since the beginning. He's had some co-designers on some of these, but he is the main designer and has been sort of the common thread throughout the worlds of Core Worlds. He also did a couple Star Trek games and a game called Dungeon Alliance. And if you want Dungeon Alliance stuff, you can get that through this Kickstarter as add-ons as well. So the Nemesis, the solo mode, basically, is going to be a medium-heavy complexity, and that's in keeping with all the Core Worlds deck building stuff. If you're looking at Empires, which is the new worker placement game, that is going to be heavy based on what we know at this time. And this Kickstarter campaign will complete on February 25th, and they are funded. So they've just funded recently. 60K is what they wanted. They've just passed it. So it's not like Human Punishment. They're not doing 11 times their initial ask, but they have funded. This is going to happen. It's not going to not fund. Okay. So if you want this, you should be good. Then we get to Maquis 2nd edition. This caught my attention the first time around when they did Maquis a couple years ago. And it is a solo worker placement game. And it's set around the Nazi occupation in France. And it sort of has varying objectives from game to game. Things like printing underground papers or sabotaging, transport lines and things like that. But you'll need to be completing these objectives while you're also sort of avoiding Nazi patrols. It's from Side Room Games, and they're kind of getting going. I think Maquis, and the fact that this is getting a 2nd edition, is really going to give Side Room a boost. But the other games that they've done are Orchard, Fallen Angels, and Black Sonata. Not Black Orchestra, just to be clear. Black Sonata, different game. And Maquis is a medium light game, and I think word has hit the street on this one, because this campaign is coming in at 17 times their asking price right now. Now, like I said, it doesn't actually finish funding until the 25th of February, so they've still got a week or so to go. But they're already at 17 times their initial funding ask, which has them sitting around $105,000. So this is doing really well for them. And I think part of it may be the fact that it is a medium light game. It's also a solo game, which I think is probably something people are looking for right now more than ever, while a lot of states and countries are still social distancing. And it's only $35, including shipping. So this is not an expensive game. This is, a smaller game that you can buy and have some solo fun during our current apocalypse that we're in. And it's doing well. So I think that's good for the game. That's good for the campaign. That's good for Side Room Games. And hopefully we'll see more from them. They seem to be ramping up and doing good things. After that, we have a trilogy of games from Oink Games. Oink Games. I just like saying that. Oink Games. And Oink Games has done probably the most famous game, which I've actually played, is called Deep Sea Adventure. And that is sort of it's a small box game. It's light, it's competitive, and it's push your luck. And so you're kind of going underneath the ocean, and you're trying to get treasures, and then you're trying to beat everybody back to the top before they run out of air. So they've kind of done a similar version on that theme with this. It's called Moon Adventure. So instead of going underwater, you're exploring in space, but it's the same idea that you can run out of air, and you're trying to kind of get further away to collect certain things and then kind of get back before your air runs out. So that's 1/3 of this Kickstarter. There are 2 other games that are also involved in this Kickstarter. One is called In a Grove, which is actually a reprint. So they've published this before, but they're doing it again and they're doing it nicer. They're improving this game a little bit. And this is a social deduction and bluffing game. And essentially the players in this game are witnesses at a crime scene. And so they're trying to kind of figure out who did it and then also bluff their way out of being accused of the crime themselves. And the last game is called Dokojong, which is a little deduction game where you've got 5 little tiles and one of them's a dog, and everyone's trying to figure out which tile is the dog of the other players. Now, most or all of Oink Games games are designed by Jun Sasaki, and all of these games are very kind of small box light games. So these are fillers or games you're going to maybe want to start off a game night or finish it up, but these are not big brain burnery games. They're kind of abstract and smaller components, but they're very creative. They have kind of fun packages and fun components, and they're not without choices, which is always kind of my thing when I'm looking at lighter games. Like, do I still have good choices that I can make, or is the game just kind of playing itself? And I like Oink Game stuff from what I've seen. Now, this campaign's also doing really well. So it's going to conclude funding on, I believe, February 26th. And they are currently sitting at 121,000, which is 13 times their requested funding. So they're doing really, really well. The only thing about this campaign is you can't just buy one game. You're getting all 3 games or nothing. Which is a little odd because Oink Games has a fairly big back library. So I don't know if any of those games will be available in the Pledge Manager, but they aren't listed in the campaign. So for this campaign, it's just all or nothing. You're getting all 3 games, or you're not pledging. And that price point, continental United States, shipping included, $85. Which seems like a lot for 3 smaller games, but people who like Oink Games like Oink Games. Following that, we have Clinic Deluxe Editions. Now, Clinic is designed by Albin Viard, and it's being published by his company, which does his games. And Clinic also has art by Ian O'Toole, who is perhaps my favorite board game artist. He does almost all of the Eagle Griffin Vital Lacerda games. He did Rococo Deluxe, which came out fairly recently. That Kickstarter was delivered. He's just done a ton of games. I think he did the Reckoners. I mean, he has a fairly diverse portfolio in the games that he's done. But he does some of my favorite games, these kind of big Euros, chunky Euros. And Clinic is definitely one of them. This is a worker placement game. It is a heavy game. This already existed. It actually existed even before the most recent Kickstarter campaign as a kind of smaller game. And then they did a Kickstarter campaign a couple of years ago, a year or two ago, and they did a nice, really nice version of this game. I think that's when Ian O'Toole came on board. And so now we're back with more Clinic. And this is for the deluxe editions. Now, there are 2 of these. They're kind of called extensions. So if you back the original Clinic campaign, when it was on Kickstarter, the kind of nicer Ian O'Toole version, there was an expansion with that called First Extension, and it had some modules that you could add into the game. So this is more modules. There is a second extension and a third extension, and together I believe they incorporate 25 different modules. So if you like Clinic, you're going to have a lot of modules and a lot of variability if you back this. It is a lot of kind of little modules, mini expansions that you can throw in. So there are 4 different price points for this one. If you just want one of the 2 extensions, $55. If you want to get both of the extensions, the new extensions, $95. If you want to get all of the extensions, which includes a campaign book, which comes with either of the 2 previous price points, but you also want the previous stuff, the previous extension, $140. And then if you want everything, including the Clinic base game, $199. As I said before, the 2 new expansions will include between them 25 different modules that you can throw into the game to increase variability in many different ways. Also included in this is a campaign, so you can play Clinic as a campaign. And then on top of that, there are 2 additional kind of modules that are not offered through the other price points. These need to be added on as add-ons. So one of them is called Extension 4, and it was designed as an Essen exclusive. And it kind of puts a basement into the hospital, and it gives you things you can do in the basement. So it's a smaller module. It's this, specific to just the basement. And then the other one is a COVID-19 themed module, and that basically adds a cooperative mode to the game. Now, personally, because it's got this COVID-19 theme to it, I think I'm going to stay away from that part. After everything that we've been going through and we're still going through, I don't want to play a game with a COVID-19 theme. Maybe in 10 years or something, I'd be, willing to play it. I like the idea of a cooperative mode. I just wish that was themed around anything other than COVID-19. I know that if you do get it, it's $25 for either one of those two additional add-ons. So $25 for the Extension 4, which is the basement thing, and $25 for the COVID-19 cooperative mode. I like the idea of a cooperative mode. I really would have been interested, I think, in maybe adding that on. But because it's COVID-19, I can't deal with that right now. It's too close to reality. So I think, personally, I'm going to pass on that one. But it's there if you want it. Now, Clinic's been doing really well as well. They're at 6 times their requested funding, and which means they're about 190,000 right now. So they're doing really well in this campaign, and I'm happy for them. And as I said before, Clinic is a heavy game, and it will complete its funding on February 28th. Now we're going to go to our only game that is not a Kickstarter game. This is actually on GameFound. And this game kind of flew by me when it premiered. I missed it because this is only the second game that has used GameFound for its crowdfunding. People have been using GameFound as a fulfillment service for a couple of years now. But when Awakened Realms decided to also do pledging and crowdfunding through GameFound, they launched it earlier, a few months ago with ISS Vanguard. And there was a lot of publicity for that. And it did gangbusters, okay? But I didn't actually hear any. I thought Kingdom Rush Elemental Uprising, that's the game I'm talking about right now, I thought that was actually coming to Kickstarter, and it kind of surprised me when it didn't appear there. And then I found out later that it had actually appeared on GameFound. I didn't really see too much marketing for that. So I feel like it's important for me to mention this in case this is something that you are wanting. It's on GameFound. It's not going to be on Kickstarter, so go there. And it is from Lucky Duck Games, who've done the Chronicles of Crime series. They've also done a game called Destinies, which I pledged and I'm pretty excited about. So they've got a new Kingdom Rush game coming. Now, the interesting thing is this is a standalone game. I mean, I guess you could consider it a sequel, sort of, but the important thing is that it's standalone. So you don't need the previous Kingdom Rush game to play this. From what I've seen, I think this is a little bit of an evolution of the first Kingdom Rush game, Rift in Time. So it's still tower defense, it's fully cooperative, and like the first game, it's got scenarios that you can kind of pick and choose from, or you can play them together as a campaign. One of the co-designers of this, Sen-Fung Lim, is the designer of Akrotiri and Belfort and Junk Art, and a game that's delivering probably later this year called Mind Management. Looks pretty cool. So anyway, this is the pricing in this is a little odd. There are several different pledging options you can do here on this one. And I think the reason it's a little confusing is because you can just get Elemental Uprising, the new game, or you can get the old game, which is unrelated. You don't need them to play together. But if you want all this stuff, if you want to get both games, you can do that. And then they give you options for 1-wave shipping and 2-wave shipping. And so you would do 2-wave shipping if you wanted, kind of the Rift in Time stuff and you wanted to get that soon. And then you'll get the Elemental Uprising stuff later when that is finished with production. So if you just want Elemental Uprising, the new game, the pledge for that is going to be $59. If you want to get Rift in Time and Kingdom Rush, it's going to be $95. But that's just the base game for Rift in Time. If you kind of want all of the little expansions and the extras for Rift in Time, if you want to go all in and you want to get the new game, kind of everything, it's going to be, with shipping, it's going to be $278. There's a lot of stuff involved in that. It's $95 if you just want the 2 base games. It's $278 if you want all the stuff for Rift in Time. And if you want to do 2-wave shipping on everything, it's $279. So it's only $1 more. So if you're getting everything, you might as well just do the 2-wave shipping. That way you'll get Rift in Time sooner, and you'll get Elemental Uprising when that actually delivers, which is in, I think, March 2022. If you're getting the kind of older stuff, the Rift in Time stuff, that stuff will be delivered in July 2021. Now, if you just do 1-wave shipping, it's all coming in March 2022. So, make sure you select the option that you actually do want. Now, this will conclude funding on March 4th. The complexity of the game is medium heavy, and they're doing well on this Kickstarter campaign. They are currently sitting at 7 times their requested funding, or $384,000. So they're at a third of $1,000,000 right now. And I have a feeling part of that may be from all of the Rift in Time kind of add-on stuff that you can, add on, because I don't think they're getting to that number just from the $59 pledges for Elemental Uprising. But if people are doing those big $278 pledges because they want all the stuff, that's probably what's driving that number up so high. So also completing their funding on March 4th is Paladins of the West Kingdom, City of Crowns. Now, this is a heavy game. If you've played Paladins, it definitely qualifies as a heavy. And this particular expansion adds on board extensions, both for the player boards and the main boards. And it just adds a lot of new stuff to it. So there's new townsfolk, new outsiders, new paladins, new king's orders, and new king's favors. And there's also a new diplomacy attribute that every player will be managing in the game. There's also an added solo difficulty level. So you can kind of crank up the notch on the solo game if you want. And there are a few different price points for this one. If you just want the new expansion, $33. If you want the new expansion and the new kind of collector's edition, which will hold Paladins and the new City of Crowns kind of all in one box, as well as sleeved cards. They've made sure to allow enough room for sleeved cards, and kind of just, extras like metal coins and things like that. It will all fit in this box. So if you want that box along with the expansion, $56. Now, if you want to go all in because you don't have any West Kingdom games and you want the whole kit and caboodle, which means you'll be getting Architects of the West Kingdom and that expansion, Artisans. You'll be getting metal coins. You'll get Tome Saga, which is the game kind of that pulls all 3 of these games into one long connected campaign. And that is Architects, Paladins, and Viscounts. And you'll also get Viscounts of the West Kingdom. And you'll also get the Paladins base game. And you'll get this expansion. And you'll get the collector's box. So if you want to do all that stuff, that's $242. Now, the cool thing about Garphill Games is that when they do their shipping, they supplement it a little bit, and then it's a very low number. So basically everybody is paying $8 on top of their pledge, and that includes the high level. So if you want to get all of these games, $242, only $8 of that is shipping. You're getting a steal on the shipping. So it's not a bad way to do it. I think I mentioned this campaign is going to complete on March 4th. It's doing really well. It's at 14 times the asked funding, which means they're sitting on $235,000 right now. So they're doing well. And the last game in the currently running Kickstarter section here is Ares Expedition, the Terraforming Mars card game. And this will complete funding on March 5th. They are doing very well. They are at 25 times their requested funding, which means they're sitting on $500K or $500,000. And this is a medium-heavy game, just like Terraforming Mars. It's a little interesting to me, right? Because it's being billed as the Terraforming Mars card game, but Terraforming Mars is a card game. I think what's happened is that Terraforming Mars has just had so many expansions, and it's become so unwieldy, and it is this enormous table hog, and pretty much every mechanic that you can think of is in there in some way. I guess not worker placement, but there's a lot of stuff, from tile placement to hand management, resource management. And every time they add another expansion, there's kind of more stuff. And it's great, but it's enormous, and it's become a very long game if you're using everything, and it's a huge table hog. So I think this was the designer's, Jacob Frixelius, I believe his name is. I think that was his way of trying to maybe pare the game down and get back to basics. But if you look at the campaign, it is not just a straight card game. There are other mechanics in there very similar to Terraforming Mars. So you still got like dual layered player boards, and you're doing resource management, you're doing some other things. But the footprint of this game looks much smaller. You know, it looks almost like a portable version of Terraforming Mars. Now, if all you want is this new card game, it's $50. Okay, so there's a few different price points for this one as well. Now, if all you want is this new Terraforming Mars card game, Ares Expedition, $50. If you also want to get the base game, Terraforming Mars, you're going to get the new card game and original Terraforming Mars base game, $101. If you already have the Terraforming Mars base game, so you don't need that, but you want all of the other stuff with it, you're going to get the Ares Expedition, this new card game, and everything else for Terraforming Mars that doesn't include the base game. That's $141. If you want to throw the base game in there, so you want to get the card game, the base game, and all of the stuff, all the expansions, $191. And then one final price point, if you also want, on top of everything else, the recent 3D tiles and this kind of huge storage box that stores all of Terraforming Mars, including the 3D tiles, $300. So that's your price. That's your top price tag. And I'm thinking since they're sitting on $500,000 right now with this campaign, I think a lot of people are going in for that all in. I did actually go in for the 3D tiles myself on their previous campaign when they, the first time that they launched it. And I have a feeling maybe not everybody did. Maybe some people are kind of doing a wait and see. But it seems like since this campaign is doing so much, there must be people taking advantage of that price point now. Okay, so that concludes the currently running Kickstarters section. And brings us to the acquired games section. Now this section has gotten a little bigger than it normally will be, and the reason for that is that I am acquiring a bunch of games from 2020 and trying to get them all played so that when I do my top 25 of 2020, and I think that'll probably end up being put out in March. I want to make sure that I get to play everything that I think might be on that list. There'll be a couple things that don't make it into consideration, like I'm not going to be playing Pandemic Legacy Season 0, just because my fiance and I are still on Season 1. So I think it's going to be a little while until I get to 0. So I know that one will not be in consideration for me. But almost everything else will be, and I'm kind of slowly playing my way through the games that I haven't played yet from 2020 that I think might make my list. And also, in addition to that, there are 2 games right now I'm kind of waiting on to come back into printing that I really do want to get a chance to look at, and that is Lost Ruins of Arnak and Beyond the Sun. So I think once those 2 kind of republish and I'm able to get my hands on them and play them, I think my list will probably get published shortly after that. In the meantime, though, there are still kind of there are Kickstarters coming in, and on average, I probably get about 4 to 6 Kickstarters a month. But I also have a lot of retail games coming in right now as well. So the games that I've acquired in the last couple weeks are the Ancient World 2nd Edition, which is a Ryan Lawcat game, and I got that one along with my Sleeping Gods pledge. And I haven't played it yet. I like Ryan Lawcat. I like his games. They beefed up the components a little bit with the 2nd edition. They made it look a little bit better. I don't know when I'm going to get this one to the table, just because I'm trying to play all these 2020 games and kind of new games as they're coming in, and trying to get those done so I can make these first impressions videos, which I'll talk about later at the end of this video in the channel update. So this one, it may be a while before I get to the Ancient World 2nd edition, but it looks pretty cool. I know it takes place in Lawcat's, general world that a lot of his games are set in, and there's kind of these big hulking god type monsters, and you're sailing around, and I think it's kind of a set collection game. I don't really know that much about it. I just know at the time that I wanted it, and so I added it onto my Sleeping Gods pledge. So that's in. I also have Import Export Definitive Edition, which it is the first Jordan Draper game that I've acquired. And I'm really excited for it. I hear it plays a little bit like Glory to Rome. And I think it's just kind of a grab bag mishmash of mechanics and stuff. And I've been very intrigued by Jordan Draper in general because he has this style to his games that, I mean, even though they're, mass produced at this point, they feel very kind of hand designed. But I'm looking forward to getting that to the table soon, and it will happen soon because I am going to be doing a first impressions video on it. And then there's Sleeping Gods, and that's the new Ryan Lawcat game. It's sort of this epic storytelling game. It takes the same kind of like journal stuff that he had in Above and Below and Near and Far, but it puts it on this kind of big campaign thing, kind of like Seventh Continent, although it's not as, I think, repetitive or restrictive as Seventh Continent. And the cool thing about Sleeping Gods, and I already have a first impressions video up on that if you want to see it, we are more than halfway through our first campaign. But the cool thing about Sleeping Gods is that it's designed to have multiple campaigns. So in one campaign, you're not going to be able to do everything. And from what I can tell, it looks like maybe 4 to 5 campaigns will get you through all of the content, I think. And that may include the expansion as well. I'm doing a little bit of guessing right now, but the amount of stuff we're kind of exploring and the number of quests that we're finishing in our first campaign, I think it's going to be about 4 or 5 campaigns to kind of do everything. And another neat thing about Sleeping Gods is that there are map sheets that kind of show the entire world. So when you're going through, your journal with the different maps, you can go back and see the bigger picture on these kind of player sheet map. It's a much bigger map. And it has more kind of territory and more land and more areas and more interactivity and more interactive stuff than you're ever going to be able to do in a campaign. So they also give you this kind of like achievement sheet, almost like if you were playing a video game and you're trying to like get the platinum or something. It's kind of a list of achievements. So as you're doing one campaign and you're finishing, you'll be able to kind of check off all the stuff you did, all the stuff you found, the achievements basically that you made. And then as you play successive campaigns, you'll be able to add to that. And it's a great game. We're really enjoying it. If you want to hear more, go check out the first impressions video, but it's a really good game. And I would recommend it to anybody who likes kind of exploration and narrative storytelling games. So that has come in. And then here's a list of retail games that have come in as well. So I've got Bonfire, which is the new Feld game, which is supposed to be amazing. And I'm looking forward to getting that played. I have a friend who's a Stefan Feld fan. And when he played this game, he tweeted out, "Feld is back." And I think from what I've heard, this is kind of Stefan Feld in top form. So I'm excited to play that. And that is one that I'm going to be playing for my potential 2020 list. I've got a new release called Cantaloop Book 1 Breaking into Prison, which is pretty cool. It is taking a theme like an old text adventure game, PC game from like the 80s, something that Sierra Online, who did like King's Quest and Space Quest, might make. If you go back further, you might hit like Infocom, the text adventure games. And then if you come forward in time, you're going to run into stuff like Double Fine. And, they did like The Wolf Among Us and the Walking Dead games and stuff, or Monkey Island. So this game is supposed to play kind of like that, where it's a storytelling game, it's a narrative game, and you're walking around and you're picking up objects and you're combining them with other objects and you're using them to solve puzzles. So these are the kind of computer games that I grew up with as a kid in the 80s. And so I was really, really intrigued by this game. I thought it sounded really cool. My only kind of worry about the game, because I've looked at it already, and I'm actually probably going to play it later today. And I think there's only about 5 to 8 hours of game in this. So we'll see. We'll see how I feel like it is, money versus time and value and all those things. But from looking at it, it looks like it's going to really honor those games very well and kind of be a very honorable board game adaptation of those kinds of computer games. King's Quest and Space Quest and Monkey Island. My worry, though, is that it's just going to make me wish that I was playing the video game, that I had like a keyboard or a controller in my hand instead of dealing with physical components. But we'll see. I don't know. I am excited about it. The whole idea of it is I find really exciting, and I know I'm going to have a good time playing it. I'm just wondering if when I finish it, I'm going to say, I would have liked that even more if it was actually just a computer game or a video game. But we will find out. Also in is CloudAge, which is the new Alexander Pfister game. Now, I felt like I needed to take a look at this one again for my 2020 list, but I don't know. The reviews and kind of feelings that are coming out on CloudAge are not as positive as they were, last year for Maracaibo. So I'm not sure where this one will land, but I do like Alexander Pfister a lot. He has some amazing games. I love Mombasa, Great Western Trail. There's also news right now about Great Western Trail that's pretty cool, but means that I'm probably going to have to get rid of my old Great Western Trail game because Plan B Games, who did the Century Spice games, they're doing a new version of Great Western Trail and a couple of sort of thematic sequels. And I don't know if they're going to be interconnected the way the Century games are, so that you can kind of play them kind of all together. But it looks like such an advancement on Great Western Trail that I think I may have to kind of switch out copies, which is going to be a little problematic because of Rails to the North, the expansion for it. But I think they're doing a version of that as well. Yeah, my point is that I'm a little worried that CloudAge might not be, maybe even the sort of lower half of Alexander Pfister's oeuvre. We shall see. Also, I acquired Gaia Project. And this was something that I had sort of long, I don't know if I want to say I resisted acquiring it, but I really like Terra Mystica a lot. I think it's a fantastic game. However, you can play Terra Mystica for free at Board Game Arena. And whenever I want to play it, I can always get my fill there. And I think there is some more variability to Gaia Project. It's not quite as boxed in. So I had always said to myself, if I get one of these games, and I also have Clans of Caledonia, which is not the same publisher, but kind of similar. But I always thought if I got either Terra Mystica or Gaia Project, I probably would get Gaia Project just because it has, I think, more variability and more maneuverability in what you're doing. And then whenever I get the scratch, or whenever I get the itch to play Terra Mystica, I can always just go to Board Game Arena. I also don't really love the expansions for Terra Mystica. So again, it meant that Gaia Project was the one for me to acquire. And so I finally did. There was a new Capstone Games just did a new printing, and it seemed like the time to jump on. So I did. I also acquired Istanbul Big Box. My original reasoning for getting this one is I thought it would be something that my fiance and I could play with kind of non-gamer friends. And I don't know what I was thinking. I was thinking Istanbul was more of a card game, I think. I think I was perhaps a bit confused. So we actually did play Istanbul, and I'll talk about it a little bit later. But my fiance did not love it. And it was, I mean, it's still a fairly simple game, but it's not the simple bare bones card game I think I was thinking of. I think I might have had it confused with another game. So anyway, I liked it. I'm going to keep it for a while. But I don't know if it'll have the functionality I was hoping it might have when I ordered it. I also acquired Moonrakers, which I've played a few times, and I'll talk about that down below. That was actually a Kickstarter game that I did not back, and I heard good things about it, so I just bought it directly from the publisher's website. The only thing I didn't get with it are the metal ships, because that would have been an extra. I didn't feel like it was necessary. And there is a 15-card kind of bonus pack that people who backed Kickstarter got, and it's not available anywhere else, not even through the publisher. So I wasn't able to get that. But I do have everything else. It is a really beautiful looking game. It's got some kind of interesting design ideas behind it. But I had some problems with the game itself, and I'll talk more about that in the played section. I acquired Seastead, which is a very interesting 2-player version of Flotilla. And Flotilla may have been my favorite game last year. I love Flotilla. I think it's fantastic. The problem is that Flotilla does not play less than 3 players. You need a 3-player minimum, and that is a hard number. And I actually wish that more games would just do that. If they're not 1 or 2 player games, don't try to be, don't pretend to be. And the designers of Flotia basically said, this is not going to work as a 2-player game. We're not even going to try to do it. And I respect that. But it doesn't make Flotia hard to get played, especially in a pandemic when everyone's social distancing. So I haven't really been able to play it since Dice Tower West at the beginning of 2020. I'm really excited to teach my fiance Flotia when we eventually can get another person or two over here to play it. But in the meantime, I thought I would get Seastead, which is in the same universe as Flotia. It is a sort of a thematic, I wouldn't call it a sequel. It's just a separate game. It's a 2-player game. So they went and they designed a game that is a 2-player version of Flotia, but the mechanics are very different. The designers are different. So it's not, it's the same kind of world, and I'm sure it has some similar mechanics, but it isn't just a 2-player version of Flotia. It is very much its own game with its own different things going on. So I'm really looking forward to getting that played and seeing if I enjoy it anywhere near as much as I enjoy Flotia. And then the last 2 games that I added were Time Stories expansions, Expedition Endurance and Lumen Fidel. And the reason that I got those, if you've been following Time Stories, there is what is now the old white cycle, which was the original Time Stories white box, and they made 8 different expansions for that. And they are no longer producing expansions for that. They are now producing a blue series. And in this new series, instead of having a base game and these smaller expansions, every single game is its own standalone game. So I think they're a little bit more expensive because they're putting everything you need in each box. But I don't know. I think they're just trying something different to see that if it sells maybe better than these kind of smaller expansions did. But my guess here is that these expansions for the white cycle are not going to be published or supported very much longer. So I am going about acquiring them all, and I'm usually doing it when I'm buying other games that I want that are new and I need to fill out my cart. I'll throw in a couple Time Stories expansions. So I think I have 3 more that I need to acquire. So I'm getting there. I'm paying a little more for them than I normally would because I usually like to wait until they come on a sale for like $15. But because I'm trying to pick them up now before they just kind of go out of print forever, I'm just grabbing them when I can, and I'm not waiting for sales prices. I think if I wait for sales prices, I just may end up not being able to get them. So those are all of the acquired games from this period. Now, the games that I backed, games that I talked about last video that I actually backed myself are Carnegie Deluxe Edition. And this is another game with Ian and O'Toole art, which pretty much single-handedly sells me on it. It's also a economic Euro game, that's definitely my wheelhouse. I mentioned before in the previous video that I'm a little worried about the designer because he also designed T.I.M.E, which is one of my least favorite games of all time. But I'm giving him another shake with this and the combination of the Ian O'Toole art. I also backed Primal the Awakening, which was something that I really sat on the fence about because that was a very expensive game. And it's one of these big kind of monster hunting boss battle games. I do not own Kingdom Death Monster. And I think with the way that game has kind of swollen in price and content, I don't think I ever plan on acquiring Kingdom Death Monster. I'd love to play it sometime. I do have a friend who has it, so maybe at some point I can play some games with him. But I think it's just too expensive and it takes too much space and it's too much of an investment. So I don't think I will ever acquire Kingdom Death Monster. Now, I do have Aeon's Odyssey Trespass. I think that is the name of it. And that is sort of a Kickstarter from a year or two ago that is in production, and it's supposed to be kind of that genre. I also backed Townsfolk Tussle, which is sort of a more casual boss battler. I think that will appeal to non-gamers. Like I'll be able to have kind of friends come over who don't play games, and I think they'll be interested in Townsfolk Tussle because this is very unique vintage art style from 20s cartoons or like Cuphead. It's a recent video game that also kind of used that style. So Townsfolk Tussle looks really cool. And I got to Primal the Awakening. I'm like, God, I've got Townsfolk Tussle coming. I've got Aeon Odyssey Trespass. Do I want to spend this money on this big game? And essentially, I ended up backing it for this channel, I think, really, at the end of the day. And I could afford to back it at the time, so I decided to do that. But it's a big, expensive game. I was on the fence for a long time. There's not much of a board for this one. It's just kind of like a monster that sits on a board, and then like a central board, and you kind of turn him around a little bit. And there are 4 different areas where you can move around him, and it's all about stances and attacking. It feels very like a board game version of Monster Hunter. There's actually a Monster Hunter board game coming later this month, couple months, soon. I think I'm going to pass on that, though. I'm not a fan of the publisher of that. And so I've got Primal the Awakening. Also, Jeremy Howard and Alex Radcliffe both played the prototype for this one quite a bit, and they both had nothing but good things to say about it. So it made me feel a little bit better about pulling the trigger on this one. And then the final game that I backed from the previous period was Tinner's Trail, which is a reprinting of a Martin Wallace game. And I love Martin Wallace designs. I've got Age of Steam. I've got Railways of the World. I've got both of those. I've got both Brass games. I've got Australia. And I've got Wildlands. I haven't even played Wildlands, but I'm excited to play that. It's a weird game for Martin Wallace. Martin Wallace doing miniature skirmish game, but it looks cool. It looks very similar to like maybe the Unmatched games, and then there's a new game coming out from the designer of Unmatched called, I think it's called Dire Alliance Horror, and then they're going to put out more Dire Alliance games. Wildlands looks kind of similar to that, where it's kind of line of sight and miniatures and skirmishing. Anyway, let's get back to Tinner's Trail. So Tinner's Trail is an older Martin Wallace Euro, and I mean, Brass, either version, take your pick. I think I like Birmingham a little bit better, but Birmingham and Lancashire, I think, both have their strengths and their uses, and I love them both. And I like Martin Wallace economic Euro games. So a new version of Tinner's Trail that's kind of upgraded and it looks nice. It's being published by Alley Cat Games. It was a no-brainer for me. Okay, finally, let's talk about the games that I played. And several of these I already have first impressions videos out. So if you want to hear more about these games, you can go and check out my first impressions videos. But the first one on the list is Dune Imperium. And Dune Imperium combines deck building and worker placement kind of equally, along with the kind of combat every round, like kind of event combat every round that you'd find in something like Game of Thrones, the board game. And it is just, there's also there's a victory point track. It's kind of a race. There are some reputation tracks. You can get victory points from going up those reputation tracks. You can get them from winning the events that happen every round. And there are some cards that you can buy that have victory points on them. So you're doing all of these various things. It's very thematic. It does a great job of implementing the feel of the movie. It's by the designer of Clank, who's an amazing designer, Paul Denon. I think that Clank series is just very, very strong throughout. So there's a very tight sense of design behind Dune Imperium, and it's a really solid game. I wonder if people might be a little intimidated by Dune Imperium. I think because it's being positioned as, this kind of great new game. But once you get your head around the kind of mechanics and how they work together, I do not think Dune Imperium is perhaps as complex as people who haven't played it might think that it is. And the other thing about Dune Imperium that's pretty cool is right now you can go to Direwolf, their website, and get a new kind of miniature upgrade. It's still on pre-order. But the base game right now, if you buy it, it's kind of cubes. And there are miniatures that you can buy to kind of pimp that game to the next level. And I've already pre-ordered it. Looking forward to it because Dune Imperium is really good and it's going to pop even more with these little minis and stuff. So big recommendation for me. If you want to see more about it, you can go check out my first impressions video. I also played Irish Gauge. And I don't know if I'll do a first impressions video for that because that's a little bit older. But that was a game that you cannot play it with less than 3 players, kind of like Flotilla. And it's a train game, and it's a stock trading game. The thing that really sets Irish Gauge apart from games like Age of Steam and Railways of the World is that while you are building train routes and you are trading stocks in those trade routes, but there's no pick up and deliver element. So it just kind of refines it down to building the routes, building these kind of train routes and networks, and owning stock. And then there's times that you can trigger kind of payouts for the stock. So it's all about when you trigger those payouts. And I really liked Irish Gauge a lot. I don't think I enjoyed it as much as Railways of the World or Age of Steam. So, and I have a lot of maps for both of those games. So I don't know if eventually Irish Gauge will end up getting sold, just because I already have a lot of games in that genre that I think I like better. But it's still a really good game, and it plays quickly. It's easy to teach. Maybe I'll keep it just for that, because it's kind of it's a better game to use maybe to teach someone if they're not ready for Age of Steam, because you don't have to deal with the pickup and deliver element. You don't have to deal with the bidding kind of every round to take actions, and you don't have to deal with kind of the action tree. You're just building train tracks, and you're activating kind of stock payouts. But it's a good little game. It's a small game too. I mean, it's back here somewhere. It's over here. It doesn't take up a lot of space. It's not a tiny box game, but it's not a big shelf hog. So it's something I can keep for a while and make a decision on later. But the game itself is good. So if the way I'm describing the gameplay appeals to you, you should like the game. So I talked a little bit about Istanbul in the acquired games, but let's talk about it a little bit more here. I got the big box, which has 2 different expansions for it. And I watched the Shut Up and Sit Down review of it, where they basically said the first edition, the coffee edition, is great. The Seals and Letters edition, not so great. But I got the big box, so I have it all. I just played the base game with it. And in Istanbul, you basically have a series of tiles. You have these workers at a market, and it kind of functions a little bit like a Mancala mechanic, where you're going around these tiles and you kind of have a stack of your trader and these assistants. And so anytime you go to a location, you either need to leave an assistant behind or pick an assistant back up, which means if you don't plan carefully, they'll reach a point where you can't actually take an action, and you'll have to take very kind of like ineffective turns until you can get to a certain tile where you can collect your assistants back. But it does create a very cool little puzzle when you're going around and you're trying to do things, so that you don't run out of your assistants and you don't run out of the ability to take actions. And then you are, every tile that you can go to in Istanbul is different. Like they're different actions on each tile. So it's a very interesting puzzle of how can I combine all these actions together to score points, get money, and get goods, and then get these rubies, which are basically the points of the game. So it's, whoever scores or whoever gets 5 rubies first wins 6 in a 2-player game. When we played this, I was able to buy a couple things that kind of supplemented my income in the game, and then I just went hard on money. And there's one of the locations you basically can buy rubies with money, and each time you go and buy another ruby, they're more expensive. But I was able to win using the money, the ruby trader that trades the rubies for money, as opposed to the other one that does it for resources. It feels like an older game at this point. It feels like a game that's 10, 15, 20 years old. But it's a compelling game as far as I'm concerned. I mean, it's something I'd still really like to play anytime. So my fiance didn't really like Istanbul. I don't know if she's going to play it with me again. Yet at the same time, even though I got it sort of for her and for a game that we could play with non-gamery friends, I think I'm still going to keep it, and I'll bring it to meetups and introduce other people to it, because I think it's a really kind of solid, good game in that kind of 5 tribes area. I don't know I think 5 tribes is probably better, but it's that kind of game where it feels kind of like a modern classic. It's not too heavy, but there are good little thinky decisions that you can make and kind of strategizing that you can do. And for me, it's fun to do that in that game. All right, so that's Istanbul. And then we come to Moonrakers, which I've played 3 times. And I am currently right now editing a first impressions video for Moonrakers. And I'm trying to edit it just right because I had some problems with the game, which I will talk about here very briefly. and that is that Moonrakers is a game that only should be played, in my opinion, with 3 or more. But unlike Irish Gauge and Flotilla, it's not marketed as a game for 3 or more. It has a solo mode, and it has a 2-player variant. And in my opinion, the mechanics that work with the solo game and the 2-player game don't really work very well. I don't think that the game is very functional at 1 or 2 players. It's essentially a deck building game and a negotiation game. And it kind of is Cosmic Encounter with deck building to some degree. So you're kind of trying to fulfill these contracts, and there's like 10 of them that you can choose through on your turn. And to do that, you are trying to play icons that match the contracts to get victory points. And it's a victory point race. At the same time, you're also getting money to buy some crew cards, which have varying abilities, and ship parts that will also have varying abilities, and put other cards into your deck as well. I like the idea of Moonrakers a lot, and I like the design of it. It's kind of retro, low key, but it pops and it looks really nice. And this is a game that I really want to like. But I think at 1 and 2 player, it's a borderline broken game, and so I think it really needs 3, probably better off 4 or 5 players playing it. So right now, I'm just trying to debate about how much to talk about that in the first impressions video. And then as far as me keeping the game, I don't really love the way that it does combine negotiation with deck building. I think that it could make for some very, very lively, fun games with the right group of people at 4 or 5 players. I don't know if that's really going to be most of my gaming groups, though. And since we're in a huge global pandemic and everyone's still self-isolating, it's not a game that I'm going to be able to get played at a 4 or 5 player count for probably a good 6 months. And so then it's a question of, if I'm feeling very lukewarm on the game, do I even want to keep it at this point and find out? And I'm on the fence with that. So I don't know. I will say that I think if you like negotiation with your deck building and you want to play it with 4 or 5 players, it's a solid game and you'll probably like it and you should get it. If you're looking for something that also can play a lower player count, in my opinion, it fails at that. And if you're a little worried about negotiation and deck building together, you need to look further at this, because I think it's going to really depend on each person and if they like the way those 2 mechanics kind of are implemented together in this game. So I'm holding on to it a little bit right now inside, just because I don't want to, I bought it from the publisher directly, and I paid quite a bit for it. So I'm a little hesitant to just get rid of it so quickly. But I have played it twice at 2 player. First time I played it incorrectly. Second time I played it correctly with the variant, and it didn't really help. And I've played the solo game, and I disliked that as well. So anyway, that was my experience with Moonrakers. And then finally on the list is Sleeping Gods, which I have played 8 times, although the campaigns are just kind of these massive ongoing campaigns. So when I say I played it 8 times, what that really means is that we probably played it for 2 hours and then took a break, and then played it for 2 more hours and then took another break. And we did that like 8 times. And we are currently 5/9 of the way through the campaign. And we're really enjoying that, my fiance and I. It is a narrative exploration game. I also have a first impressions video out on this, so if you want more on this, you can go see it. But it's a narrative storytelling game, kind of in the realm of Above and Below, but with this kind of epic storytelling campaign, kind of like a 7th Continent. And it takes place over multiple campaigns if you want to do everything that you can do in the world. There's combat in it that plays a little bit on the mechanics in Rome, where you're kind of placing gems on cards to be able to acquire them. That's kind of how you do combat. You place damage tokens on a grid on your enemies. And there's some kind of cool mechanics how you need to place the damage adjacently, not diagonally, but like adjacent, either up or down into the sides. But you can also slash damage into neighboring enemies. So if you have multiple enemies and one of them has a really hard armor class to hit and one next to it has an easier armor class, you can attack the enemy next to him and then slash the damage across into him. I guess thematically the idea there is that like combat gets messy, and maybe I stabbed this guy, I stabbed through him into the other guy, or maybe I attacked him in some way that he tripped and fell into the other enemy, which is clever and cool and gives you a little more variability in combat. It very much, if you just break down Sleeping Gods to its most essential gameplay, what you're doing is going out and involving yourself in different narrative entries. Sometimes you'll be doing challenges that require you to draw a card that'll have a number on it, and you can supplement that number by activating characters with certain icons. Now, when you do that over time, these characters are going to get fatigued and they won't be able to do that anymore. You'll also be fighting enemies, and as you fight enemies, your characters will lose health. So you'll be doing both of those things, combat and challenges within the narrative, storytelling paragraphs. And then as your characters get damaged and they get fatigued, you'll need to go to various places and kind of heal yourself back up. So that's kind of the little gameplay loop. And you're trying to stay alive and see as much of the map as possible. You're going to be fulfilling quests. And I believe your score at the end of the campaign largely depends on how many quests. I mean, there's other things too, but I think a lot of it is how many quests that you've solved and how many of these kind of adventure cards you've acquired. And that usually comes from completing challenges or quests or buying them from certain places. But Sleeping Gods is great. I put it in a medium-heavy range. And the one thing about it that is a little tough is that it is a huge table hog. You're playing 9 different characters. No matter how many players you play with, you will control 9 different characters among you. Every character has a little character board. There's a lot of resources and tokens. There's a combat board. There's a board that represents your ship. And at the beginning of every player turn, you're going to do a ship action. There's the book that you're kind of going through and looking at as an atlas that you're kind of traveling around on. And then there's the storybook. But there's so much stuff and so many tokens and resources. And it's just, there's a lot of fiddliness to it, which I don't mind at all. But the problem here is that it's a bear to get on the table and get off the table. And because the campaigns are long, like it's probably 30 to 40 hours for a campaign. And there's not a very good save system. The save system with Sleeping Gods is basically throw everything in baggies, throw everything in separate baggies, and then throw it in the box. And it doesn't have an insert. There's no kind of sorting within the game itself, with a good insert. So it's not only is it just all over the table and kind of hard to pick back up and put away, it just doesn't have a good save system. And, in a lot of other games, and something like Seventh Continent, you're kind of doing things in smaller pieces, like, right, you're going out and you're doing a quest. And then when you finish a quest, you can kind of put the game away more easily. So you can kind of do things in smaller pieces. Now, Sleeping Gods, yes, you will do multiple campaigns before you can do everything, but those campaigns are going to be 30, 40 hours each. And if you don't have a space that you can just leave this game set up on for all of that gameplay, it's going to be difficult to get it on the table and off the table. So that's sort of the only problem I see with Sleeping Gods, is just that it's a huge space hog in many ways. So that brings us to the end of the video. Normally it would. We've gone through all 4 sections, but I do want to do a channel update at the end here. And the reason is, if you've been watching my channel at all lately, you've seen that I've been putting out some of these first impressions videos. Now, they are designed not to be full teach-in reviews, but to be kind of more abbreviated looks at a game. And the goal with these first impressions videos is for me to be producing them for games that either just delivered a Kickstarter or were just hitting retail for the first time. So these are new to the world games. And my idea with the First Impressions series is to, when I haven't had time to play the game, half a dozen times, and I'm not ready to do a full review on it yet. But I've played the game once or twice, and I want to get a video out there for other people so they can kind of see some of the general mechanics, see how the game works, see how it looks, and know if it's a game for them. And to get those videos out quickly, so they'll be there right when that game is, hitting retail, or if the Kickstarter is delivering, usually a retail release is a few months away, but something that people can use as a resource to help them decide if they want to buy a game. And I'm planning on, as I move forward here, to only be producing these for, new games. Right now, though, I am kind of front loading or back loading a little bit, and I have a bunch of games that I am going to be doing first impressions for that came out as long ago as October. So if you have watched some of these first impressions videos and you like them, I'm going to give you a list of what's coming right now. So I have 2 games that I'm in the process of editing right now. They probably should be up about the time you're seeing this, maybe a day later. And those are Excavation Earth and Moonrakers. I'll give you a little sneak peek on what I'm thinking about Moonrakers, but I'll be talking about it more in that video. And Excavation Earth, I really liked. It's a new market manipulation, worker placement, area control game from David Turksey. So those will be up very soon, right around the publishing of this video. Then I have 4 other games that I've already played once or twice each. I will be getting first impressions videos out for these games probably over the weekend, early next week at the latest. And those games are Dwellings of Eldervale, Godspeed Deluxe, Rococo Deluxe, and Waste Knights 2nd Edition. And in general, I like all those games. I think they're all really good. Following that, there are 2 slates of games that I will also be doing first impressions videos on. These are games I still have yet to play, so these are in the process. And probably you will see videos coming out on these lists of games next week, running into the first, maybe even the second week of March. And those games, I'm about to list them for you. First up are the games that just hit. So that's going to be Cantaloop, Hallertau, which is the new Uwe Rosenberg game that I hear really good things about. Import-Export Definitive Edition, which is the Jordan Draper game that I mentioned just came. Kanban EV, which delivered in December, or maybe it was January, but it's the new Vital Lacerda game with art by Ian O'Toole. And Vital Lacerda is probably my favorite designer, so I'm really looking forward to that. And I'm planning on probably getting that one played tomorrow. And then Praga Caput Regni. So those are kind of the new January releases. And then there are some games that came out in the last few months of 2020. And those games will be getting that treatment as well. And those are Bonfire, CloudAge, Curious Cargo, Merv, the Heart of the Silk Road, Seastead, Tawantinsuyu, the Inca Empire, and Viscounts of the West Kingdom. So videos for all of those games will be coming out, as I said, running into early to mid-March. And then we basically will be on the regular format for the series, which means I will only be doing these videos for kind of the new games coming in, either the Kickstarters that I receive, which usually is about 4 to 6 a month, and any retail games that I get really jazzed about and look really good, and I feel the need to go out and get those. So right now, the Kickstarter games that I have delivering in the end of February and throughout March, which will be getting this treatment in March, are Merchant's Cove, Oath, the new game from Leader Games, which is sort of a thematically similar, I guess, to Root. Same designer, same artist, but different game. Shasen, which is this very interesting kind of voting game. Stronghold Undead, which is a new version of Stronghold that sort of brings together the old Stronghold game with the Undead expansion. Venice. So Venice is the new game by Capstone, and it's kind of a thematic sequel to Ragusa, which I really like Ragusa. So I was really jazzed about Venice. I'm really excited to get that and give that a look, and that comes in March as well. And then last of all, Yokohama Duel Deluxeified. So that's kind of the slate of games for kind of running through March. So once I get into those games and I'm no longer producing this backlog of first impressions videos, you'll see me start to probably do 1 or 2 first impressions videos a week, which will free up time, and I'll probably then be doing a couple full teach and reviews a week as well. And I'm not quite sure yet how I'm going to pick those games. It might be new games that I've got that I really like. It might be games I'm looking at in my collection that are older. I may be targeting some games that are kind of going up the hot list on Board Game Geek, just to help generate some views and audience for the channel. But it'll be some combination of those. But until that time, until mid-March, you are going to see me starting just to pump out these first impressions videos. And that list I just gave you of games. I think if you put all those together, that's 24 games. You will see those 24 first impressions videos coming out. Also in there, I will probably end up doing my game of the month for March, the early March monthly update. And then as we get through those, then probably 1 or 2 first impressions a week and 2 to 3 full teach and reviews. And I'll be excited as I get into those full teach and reviews and get to kind of spend more time explaining games and talking about strategies and stuff. And then finally, after I get through this kind of slate of first impressions videos and I start getting into the teach and reviews, probably about that time, I'm also going to start upgrading camera equipment, get some more cameras, some more lights, possibly have multiple camera setups. And around that time, I probably will also start to look at Patreon. But the camera upgrades and the Patreon are coming in a couple months down the line. So just something also to be aware of. I do plan on producing this channel for the long haul, and I do plan on continuing to grow the channel and upgrade everything over time. So just know that you can feel safe here with this channel. It's not gonna, I'm not gonna abandon anybody. I'm not going away. I'm gonna be here for you. So we're building a long-term relationship here if this is what you want, okay? All right, so thank you very much for watching. This video's gone pretty long. And again, if you're new here, please consider subscribing. It always helps to like the videos on the channel. And if you want to hit the alarm bell, you can get notifications whenever I publish future videos, which, as I said, is going to be about 24 more of these first impressions video over the next few weeks. Anyway, thank you very much for watching and spending some time with me here. And I will see you in the next video, which, if you're watching everything, will most likely be the first impressions videos for Excavation Earth and Moonrakers. I'll see you then.